So guys, after that DJI released the firmware called, let me check, 01.0210.10, DJI added to the Action 3 the HDR video, and after testing this mode aside with the Dji Action 2 set to DC-like and the iPhone 14 Pro, in this video I'm going to talk about all these topics. What are the resolution and the frame rate available, what are the stabilization mode available in HDR, all the control that we have over the image and also their limitation, FPS limitation because we cannot shoot for example in 50 frames per second when we are shooting in HDR. At the end of the video I'll explain why this is my new favorite mode to use the Action 3. But first of all, if you are new here, my name is Alessandro and I'm from Italy, and I hope that you like the rest of the video. So let's start talking about resolution and frame per second available in HDR video. But first of all, to enable this mode you have to swipe on the left from the regular video and you'll find the HDR video. In this HDR mode you can select between the resolution of 1080p and 4K, and the frame rate available is from 24 to 30p. You have also to keep in mind that in this mode we cannot shoot in 4:3 aspect ratio, but only in the traditional 16:9. And also, as I told you before, there is no 50 or 100 frames per second option. The type of stabilization that we have with the HDR video are Rocksteady, Rocksteady Plus and Horizon Balancing, so it is the exact same as with the regular video. Also, the field of view available are the same as in the regular video, because we have standard or the warp, wide and ultra wide. Another thing that you have to know is that you can use the digital zoom from 1x to 4x, but I don't recommend to do it because you will lose a ton of quality. Unfortunately though, you cannot use the HDR video while you're shooting time-lapse and hyperlapses, but in this mode we only have the option to choose the regular video and not also the DC-like profile. About the image control that we have, we cannot choose the shutter speed and the ISO value, but we can only choose the exposure compensation. Lucky enough, we can choose manually the white balance. And of course, all of these can be applied when you are facing the camera vertically. And the last thing that you need to know is that this mode is available when you want to remove the selfie stick from our shots. And about this, I'm going to talk you about in a separate video, so make sure to hit the subscribe button. Okay, now let's switch to talk about the image quality, because at the end of the day, this is the most important factor. Because the question that you are probably asking yourself is, the HDR video has more dynamic range, has more colorful colors. Don't worry guys, let's talk about all of this. So first of all, I can say that yes, the HDR video has more dynamic range, and this is an amazing news. To prove this, I can say that higher is the contrast of the scene and higher is the difference between the HDR video and the regular video. That in this case, as I told you, I've shooted with the Action 2 set to DC-like, to have the most dynamic range also from that camera. When I talk about dynamic range, I mean the difference between the highlights and the shadows, and the capabilities of the camera to retain both informations. A good example of this problem is when you are shooting in an alley, because in an alley you have a darker scene for the most part and you have a sky that is much brighter compared to the rest of the scene. So with these examples you can see that the video from the Action 3 could retain well both the sky and both the alley, while the Action 2 couldn't do it. But also in other less contrasty scene the HDR did a better job, retaining more information once again in the highlights and in the shadows. I've also tried to shoot videos in HDR indoor, and even there we have more details in the highlights, for example in the shop signs. So after my testing I can state that yes, the HDR video has more dynamic range. And spoiler alert, this is the main reason why I've decided to using this mode now from the future. Another great advantage is that when you're shooting in HDR, the colors straight from the camera are fine and you don't have to do a further color grading or color correction, as with the DC-like, because the DC-like straight off the camera is less contrasty and less saturated compared to how it's supposed to be. But looking back to the alley footage, I did also comparison with the Action 3 and the iPhone 14 Pro, and amazingly you can see that the iPhone couldn't retain the sky while the Action 3 could do it. So I think that in some regards the Action 3 is better than an iPhone, and considering that phones are really known for having a good computational photography, I think that you can perfectly understand that the HDR on the Action 3 is crazy good. Since we were talking about colors, I can also say that the skin tones from the Action 3 in HDR has better colors also compared to the iPhone. But another problem that we could have using an HDR mode is ghost frosting and artifacts. But I'm happy to report that we don't have any artifacts with this HDR, and I think that the reason is because the Action Free is using a diable value of ISO and not a diable value of shutter speed. But this is only my supposition, so I can be completely wrong. And for last, the stabilization using the HDR, I think that is pretty comparable with a normal video, because I used all the time when I was skiing and I didn't have any problem with the shakies. But now let's talk for a minute about the drawbacks, because not everything is perfect. First of all, I have to say that the shots from the HDR videos are more noisier compared to a regular video shooted with the Cinelight. And once again, I think that the reason is because the camera is using a higher ISO, so in the shadows we can see more noise. And if you are curious, I think that the shots are noisier also compared to the 14 Pro. So if we want to create a ranking, I think that there is on the top the normal video with the Cinelight, then the iPhone 14 Pro, and then the Action Free with the HDR video. And talking once again about the Cinelight, I think that the shots from the HDR has more digital sharpness compared to the regular video, and you can mostly see when you are shooting two thin cables and also trees, because you can see a white line around the edge of these subjects. So guys, after seeing all of these tests, I've decided to use this mode every time I need to shoot at 25 frames per second, because having more dynamic range it's always a welcome thing. About the look straight off the camera of that footage, I think that the HDR is a little bit too saturated and a little bit less contrasty, but this is an easy fix in post-production. But if you don't have experience with color correction, you can definitely use the files straight from the camera. The only scenario that I don't recommend to use this mode is when you're shooting in extremely low light. But the reason is not because the shots are noisier, but because when you're shooting with the HDR video, as I told you, you can control the shutter speed. And since the camera is going down by default to 1/25, I think that shutter speed is too low, and that's the reason why you can see a lot of blurriness during shots in low light. After this, guys, the video is finished, and I hope that you really like this content. Let me only say that I'm blown away from the fact that we have this huge upgrade for free. The only wish remaining that I have is that we cannot shoot in slow motion when you are using the HDR, so I wish that in the future we will have it, but for now I'm happy enough. Don't forget to follow me also on Instagram to see behind the scenes content almost every day, and if you want to support directly this channel, you can buy one of my presets, because the classic one works also with the Action Free. Like this video and subscribe to this channel to see more content like this. I'll see you in the next one, guys. Bye!